Audacity. All right, here we are. Welcome to another episode of The More You Know. My apologies for not uploading last week. I was not aware that last week was actually Labor Day, and I didn't feel right recording one, so I was like, I'll just take this one off. But today we are joined with Lowell. Lowell, can you give us a little brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a podcast producer, 35 years old, and I live in Decatur, Georgia with my dog, Ender. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Very nice. What do you hear you talk about today?
I have a podcast coming out in December, and the concept is really, I guess it boils down to nature versus nurture. So, what are we more influenced by, genetics, or is it early specialization and deliberate practice that makes us good at things? So, like, is it possible to, when you have a child, turn them into a prodigy or a genius? There's a slight difference, but yeah, is it possible to do that just by training them really hard, or is it just determined by genetics, basically?
Interesting. For the people that don't know what nature versus nurture is, can you explain that topic?
Yeah, so it's just, is your performance, is your life, is it genetics? Like, did you inherit it from your parents, or is it a learned behavior? So, let's say you got B's in high school and you got C's in college. Well, were you getting those grades because of, your parents or because of your environment, basically?
Yeah, I've always been kind of curious on this topic too because in college my friends would always be able to study last minute and still do good on tests, but on the other hand, I would study for like maybe a week and still perform decently well, but sometimes like I just don't understand like how can people do so well in school even giving like minimal time on their school work. Have you discussed this topic or researched this topic?
Yeah, well, I did an interview last week with Dr. Robert Plomin. He's a famous geneticist, and he did this famous twin studies where he studied both identical and fraternal twins. So identical twins are essentially clones. Their DNA is identical, but fraternal twins, as in, they don't look the same. One could be a boy, one could be a girl. They're essentially just siblings that were born at the same time. So by looking at the performance of both of them, he could see what the correlation is between like inherited DNA and performance. So about his determination through about 25 years of research is that 60% of our performance is dependent upon our DNA. So the other 40% is just a random mashup of it, but the 60% is determined by, your parents. But then again, though, that's him. And then I do partially agree with him, but there is a lot of research that also looks at learned behavior. So my first
Yeah,
episode of the
tell us
show,
more about that.
yeah. So the first episode, the pilot episode, it's about the Polgar sisters. And if you're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell, he wrote a book called Outliers, and he started something called the 10,000 hour rule, which is basically like
Yes.
you do 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to master something. So the Polgar sisters, what's interesting about them basically is that their father, Laszlo Polgar, was an educational psychologist, and he decided, well, every genius I've ever seen, Mozart, Socrates, Einstein, they all started really, really young. So I'm going to see if I can make my child a prodigy by training them in a specific domain from the age of 3 years old on. And so he did. He found a wife. She was okay with it. They had three daughters, Susan, Sophia, and Judith Polgar, and he trained them in chess. Um, and all three of them were incredible chess players. In fact, Judith Polgar is the greatest female chess player of all time. So it was incredibly successful. But I guess the question is would he have been able to duplicate that experiment with children that were not his? So it's I believe a coincidence that his children's DNA were particularly suited for chess, And that's why he was so successful, combined with the fact that he was a great teacher and educational psychologist.
But if he didn't train them in chess, would you think that even if like they were exposed to it even a little bit throughout their life, that they would still be able to? Or
I mean, do you think Tiger Woods would have like gotten to golf if his father hadn't introduced it to him at 0 years old? I mean, you don't know it, maybe, but would he have been as
mm,
good? Probably not. I mean, when you have a head start like that, it is a big advantage. But we do see
mm,
people that are also late bloomers that don't get into it till later on that are still incredibly talented. But I think really you can't force someone into it. So if he had tried to force them into a domain that maybe they weren't as good at, I think he may not have been as successful.
gotcha. So can you have you done or have you talked to anyone regarding genetics regarding like muscle and body formation? Because I know that a lot of people in that are starting to get that are going to the gym, like they see instant success so easily, and some people may go to the gym for like 2 years, but they might not see that type of like result in like the 2 years that they've been going. Because
Well,
I've always been
yeah.
curious on this too.
I think that's all determined by genetics. You have a basically we're having the I can't remember what it's called, the DNA explosion or whatever, where we're learning all this stuff about DNA, which is incredibly complicated, by the way. Because I'm wondering, like, yes, DNA we understand. The best way to look at it is like, does this person have a heart attack? Does this person have schizophrenia? Because it's like a yes or no type of thing, so it's easier to analyze. Your parent had this heart condition, you're this likely to have this heart condition. But my question is like, where does people's motivation or like desire to like become interested in something? Are some people really interested in bass guitar and become really good at it? So that's very, very subtle, and there's thousands and thousands of DNA influences that we just don't fully understand yet. But yes, when some people, it's they're more likely to gain weight easier, like fat. So it's just much harder for them. But I think there's a big advantage for knowing, because then you can just kind of keep that in mind while you're living your life.
Mm-hmm.
But for muscles,
Gotcha.
muscles as well, absolutely, yeah. Some people it's just easier to put on muscle.
Yeah, because for me, I've always been curious of that too. Because a lot of people, when they get asked of like, oh, why is this person so much bigger than you? And then some people just respond with genetics, and I'm like, is it really genetics though, or is it like something else
I
as well?
Yeah, I mean, well, not just genetics, like, as in they lift the same amount, they get bigger. It's also the genetics that makes them driven to go work out more. And that's
Gotcha.
also affected by culture, and it's also affected by environment. But it's just the question of how much depends on whether or not you're a behavioral psychologist or a geneticist. So we're still doing a lot of research into the subject.
I know that when we were talking on Reddit, you did mention that you did interview with a lot of psychologists.
Yeah, psychologists.
About what topics do you talk with them about? Is it specifically on one specific topic of nature versus nurture, or do you branch out with every single one talking about a different subcategory with them?
Yeah. Well, just the broadest explanation of it is nature versus nurture. I'm not like, hey, what are your opinions on that? Nature versus nurture? It's like Dr. Anders Ericsson, he's the guy that Malcolm Gladwell where he drew his conclusions from Anders Ericsson's research. So I read his books and asked him very, very in depth questions about, where do people's motivations come from? I want to know why some people perform better than others and how other people can duplicate that performance in whatever domain they want. So I'm very interested in how you can properly learn and master something. So yeah, I asked them all
Gotcha.
sorts of different questions. I spoke to geneticists, psychologists. I'm doing an episode on Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and I spoke to the FBI linguistics analyst that helped catch him and put him
Oh wow.
in jail, and a forensic psychologist about, because I believe that Kaczynski was on the spectrum, which a lot of people don't really realize. And then I also did an episode on the arts. So I interviewed a 13-year-old arts prodigy whose paintings sell for, $50,000 and had her first solo exposition at 4 years old. Exhibition, I'm sorry.
What? That's incredible.
Yeah, and yeah, the question of why that with art it's very complicated because it's a subjective thing. Um,
Yeah, art really confuses me in the fact that even the most like simple or random painting or piece of art can get sold for so much money. Because I know that there was that one piece of art being spread around the internet of like the banana
yeah, the
on
banana,
the
right?
wall with the
Yeah.
tape, and that sold for so much money. And I'm
Did
like,
some guy eat
how?
the banana? Yeah, that was
I think so.
yeah, I think there was another one that was like a toilet seat. It's just, but she does abstract painting, so that's sort of similar in the sense that it's just open for interpretation. It's not, like there's a Nigerian kid that I was gonna interview as well, but just had trouble with the language barrier. But yeah, he's a hyper realistic, so he can draw something that looks very, very realistic, and he's only 11 years old. So it's very easy to see the talent in that. It's more difficult when it comes to abstract art, but yeah, art, you can't, it's hard to say something's bad. Maybe some other person likes it, and it's more about what the value of it is to them.
That just blows my mind that like if you draw like a piece of random art and even you yourself you don't know what it means, but someone may stumble across from it and they're just like, oh my god, this has such a deep meaning to it, and then they can put such a high price tag, and then that essentially is like the starting bid for it, which is insane.
Well, they do boil it down to context. I think I spoke to two museum curators, like they're the ones who choose which art goes on display. And people really like context with art. So they want to know about the artist and like what they've gone through and stuff like that. So some people are very critical of this girl, Alita Andre, because, she hasn't suffered at all or had any trauma. But I mean, still though, she's painting what her view of the world is, and I think that's totally valid.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I tried to get a
um
guy on that was like totally trashing her, but he never responded.
there's one topic that you did mention that sparked my curiosity, is that you said that you talked about the concept of motivation with people.
Yeah, yeah, right. I'm trying to figure that out
What?
still.
So like in your past interviews with the psychologist, what did they say like motivates people, and like what can people, to put it like this, what is the concept of motivation? Like what happens in your body when you get quote unquote motivated?
Sure. I spoke with Dr. Ellen Winter, famous psychologist. Her husband is the one, Dr. Howard Gardner, who created the multiple intelligences theory. Essentially, it's just like, we have an intelligence or like an IQ for art and an IQ for sports and an IQ for math. So, but with her, she coined a phrase called the rage to master, which is that when it comes to prodigies, and prodigies are children that perform as well as very talented adults. It's different from a genius, but it's essentially a child that's very, very talented. So what they display oftentimes is what she calls a rage to master, whereas they just have this incredible desire to keep doing something and get better and better and better at it. So the question of why is something that no one has fully explained yet. We still don't know, but I will give you what my opinion on it is based on the research that I've done and people I've talked to. And as far as I know, it's what it's called a positive feedback loop. So your genetics, you're suited for a domain, as in just the way that you're born, the DNA you're inherited, how it mixed up. Let's say you're naturally talented at this one thing. And then domain is anything. It's like chess, it's math, it's, painting, it's violin, it's any one thing. Let's say I'm genetically suited for chess. So I learn it faster than maybe the average person. So when I first start playing, I play somebody with that I'm friends with and I beat them, right? So I get a little bit of dopamine in my brain because, it feels good to be good at something. And so I keep practicing and getting better at it and beating people, and that just sort of keeps snowballing over and over again, and that's where that comes from. But I think there's also a lot of,
Okay.
like autism associated with those sorts of things, ADHD, the ability to hyper focus on certain tasks and stuff like that. It's a very complex topic, I guess.
I totally agree. Um, because motivation has always been an interesting concept to me because like I always get so curious on like why every time that you watch a specific motivational video that you just feel so inspired to do something, or like if you hear this one song that you love and it just gets you motivated to get up and go exercise or get up and go do any type of project. I've always been curious on the concept of motivation and like what is happening in your body and what makes other people, like why is it so difficult for other people to feel motivated as well.
Yeah, from external factors. That's I believe it's a dopamine type of thing where you get a little reward, the reward center in your brain slightly activated when you think about what you could do, and I think that's probably a big part on the creator. They did a really good job showing you what you could accomplish and that, or what the person accomplished, and that you could do it as well. And I think that's what's going on there. But yeah, what motivate? I'm just very interested in motivation as well, and why people are, and how I could make myself motivated about stuff. I recently just started to get into woodworking, and that's my new thing. I am ADHD though, so I tend to like to learn different things for a certain period of time. But yeah, I was building out acoustic panels for my room, and now I'm just going to get a miter saw and learning all about that because it's just very exciting. It's like, man, like think of all the things that I could do with it. I could build all these different things, and just the possibilities are exciting to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with this. With like everything happening in the world today, staying inside, I've just been finding myself picking up all types of hobbies, and like I got back more into like computer stuff, and like just like the satisfaction of like working on something for maybe a day or two and then watching it all come together at the end and just working and being fully functional is like such a rewarding experience, and kind of sparks your curiosity too on well, if I did this, what else can I do.
Yeah, did you start the podcast during the pandemic?
I actually did, yes, and I found myself falling in love with podcasting mostly because like one, you're getting to know someone and learning something new without like the awkwardness of like first meeting or talking to someone.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's my favorite thing about it, is the ability to connect with people and stuff like that. But I feel like, what is it about the difference of maybe somebody else is listening compared to just having a regular conversation with somebody you met? That's interesting to me as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. What made you get into like the media and like interviewing doctors and all that too?
Yeah,
What specifically made you interested in that and wanting to carry on this project for so long?
it has been a while. God, well, so I started working for this network, and entry level. I had never worked in audio production before. I came from video, and I didn't know shit about audio, but I had the job opportunity. So sort of figured maybe the best way to advance my career was to start my own show. Not one that I was hosting. In fact, I never planned to be the voice of the show, but I realized that it would be just way easier if I voiced it. So I just went ahead and did. And I did a pilot, and they greenlit it. So So the origin of the concept was, I read Outliers, I read by Malcolm Gladwell, I read Talent is Overrated by Jeff Colvin, and they both are very behaviorally like nurturist. They think it doesn't matter, your genetics don't matter. Anybody can be the best at anything if they just practice for a long time the correct way. And it's sort of Malcolm Gladwell sort of glosses over this, but Anders Ericsson, deliberate practice, it's like it's practice with a purpose. It's not just going out to the driving range and hitting balls. It's going out to the golf course, if you're into golf, and practicing what you're not good at, and getting feedback from an expert like a coach. So it's very deliberate and it takes a lot of time and energy. But then my question was, is like, why are some people motivated to go through that? It's not easy, going every single day out there and practicing something that you're not good at. So that was my big question. And so that was the concept I was interested in. It originally started as a study of prodigies because I found prodigies very interesting. Like, why are these kids like just incredibly good at stuff? I'm always amazed by people who are very talented at something. So I sort of just wanted to
Mm.
unpack that, and I felt like it was a good concept to cover. And sort of, it started out as just prodigies, but then as I went on, I realized I had to expand and just cover psychology, intelligence in general. So that's
Yeah.
really what interests me.
Yeah, you mentioned that with your example of going out into a driving range and getting criticism, constructive criticism from
Yeah, we
some
call it feedback.
feedback.
Yeah.
Do you think that a lot of people fail to do this is because in these situations you have to be kind of uncomfortable in it. I would want to say when you're starting something new, you're not good at it, but you're being watched by maybe experts, or you're sending your videos in to experts that are familiar with the subject at hand. Do you think just people are just not comfortable being uncomfortable?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just hard. It's uncomfortable, yeah. But if you're serious about improving, I think for me, I play Overwatch, PC video game, whatever, and I love
Good
it.
game.
Yeah, I don't ever get any better. So putting in the hours doesn't give me any sort of material improvement. But I know that if I were to, submit my VODs or whatever and get like a coach to look at them, I would get some really, really good feedback. I'm just not really that motivated to get better at it. So that might be part of it too. But yes, it is uncomfortable because I think it causes something called cognitive dissonance. Like in your mind, you have the way that you see it, and then when you hear that that's incorrect, it sort of makes you uncomfortable. But if you can push past that,
Discourages you.
yeah, the best thing that you can ever do is get feedback. Like if I make this episode, when I made the pilot episode, I asked for feedback from like 10 different people, and I said, tell me what you would change about it. Like what's the worst part about it? I don't want to hear it's good. I want to hear what things could make it better. And I think that's just a really powerful tool that people could take advantage of.
Do you find the way that they word their feedback is a way of like them just like shitting on you, or like do you just take any feedback no matter how they say it as like just general feedback, like neither negative or positive, just neutral feedback?
Well, it's just that I'm me myself. I'm biased. I'm subjective. I made it, so I don't
So
necessarily
you
see it how other people see it for the first time. And so being able to hear what they're experiencing for the first time is incredibly valuable because I don't know what that's like because I created it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I
no, I'm
definitely
not
get that.
mad, but I don't also not everything's valid. Sometimes people just have opinions and it's a one-off opinion. If I hear something more than once or I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, then I'm like, yeah, I'm going to change this. But if they're just like, oh, this one part, I'm just like, yeah, I don't care about that.
I definitely agree because I know that when I first like producing content, whether that just be articles or something, and I start getting feedback, it was very hard for me personally to accept it because I feel like if you do start something and then you're like proud of what you made, and then you get feedback, and then you kind of just get really defensive over your creation because you made it.
Yeah, and see, if you think it's really, really good the first time you made something, that's your problem right there because you should assume that it sucks. And that
Yeah,
anything, and you should assume that any feedback you're going to get is just going to make it better. And your goal should be to make something that's good, not just one
definitely.
off. Like, you're not going to be great at something the first time you try it.
I definitely agree with that because for me, it did take me a while for like just to like accept the feedback and like actually because when I actually listened to the feedback and I produced more content, I could see the viewers getting up there more, the ad revenue coming in, like instead of 1 penny a day, maybe I got 2 pennies a day.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
definitely. It's just a very powerful tool, and everybody should take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. And then going back to your topic of like when like starting something new at first. That was like how you mentioned Overwatch. It kind of related to me because when I first switched from console gaming over to PC gaming, I completely sold all of my consoles, sold everything related to consoles, and I got myself a PC and I had a fresh new start at PC. And at first, I sucked at like the majority of every PC game that like I played because I wasn't used to like the sensitivity of the mouse, the movement of my fingers on the keyboard. But like over time, as I practice, like maybe on weekends, I played for like maybe all day. No, not all day. Those are like my old days, but maybe for maybe for like a night or two with a couple of buddies of mine. Then that's when I started realizing like, well, that's when I started noticing like my progression of my skills as I really practiced it, and I kind of isolated myself from any other like entertainment source.
Yeah, no, it definitely took me a while to get the hang of the keyboard and mouse, but it does feel more natural now.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I'm curious of, have you ever heard of the Mozart theory?
Yeah, I have, and
Is that Can you talk to me about that? Because, like, for me, when I first entered college, I tried to do almost all of, like, the cliche things to get you better at studying. And one thing that I read was, like, listen to classical music and you'll tend to memorize something way better. And then that led me on to the Mozart theory, which was if you play classical Mozart around your child when they're born, and when they're doing stuff, they'll most likely end up more intelligent or something.
right, it's essentially it's a myth. What it is I talked about Dr. Ellen Winter about this, and they did a study and completely debunked it. It wasn't
Really?
specifically what I was asking her about, but she did talk about it. So people believe that classical music made it like your increase your intelligence or your memory for short periods of times or for whatever. But what they found is that it was anything positive. So you could listen to like a good podcast episode and you'd be like slightly better at stuff for like 15 minutes or something. So it wasn't classical music specifically, it was just anything that made you feel good.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's always been an interesting concept of mine.
Yeah, maybe I should cover that in
Cause
the episode.
yeah, cause like for me, I totally took that and I ran with that concept for like the majority of my freshman year, and I just listened to Mozart, listen to any classical music that I could during my study sessions.
Well, I think the fact that you were motivated to like make that extra effort was worthwhile anyway. So,
Yeah, like for me, it was kind of like a little trial error. Oh, like a trial period of like, all right, let's prove if this is right or not, or if this really works or not.
yeah, but you have to like measure, with and without, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard to measure that type of stuff. I talked to this guy, Robert Hogarth. He talks about a kind versus a wicked learning environment. So, like a kind learning environment is something like chess, where the rules stay the same. But a wicked learning environment is something like college, where, you know, each class is different, each assignment's different, everything's different. So it's very, very hard to measure those.
for me, I kind of just realized that anything without words or lyrics to it, I was able to study really good too.
Oh, yeah.
Because I tried listening. Like for me, I can't study with music that has like words in it. So like I can't have someone rapping to me while I'm trying to study because I kind of diverge my attention to the lyrics instead of the stuff that I'm supposed to be reading.
Yeah, the audio input, for sure. No, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. My ADHD brain, I've got like four ideas in 30 seconds. So anything that focuses my attention is pretty bad when I'm trying to focus on something.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I feel like whenever I get onto like a certain project or if I'm working on something for myself and like I get really into it, it's so hard for me to stop or like so hard for me to like think of anything else. Like I forget to eat sometimes and then I look at the time and I'm like, "Oh crap, I should probably eat something."
Are you
And it's been
ADHD?
like 4 hours. Um never really tested for it, but like I probably have some traits here and there, I
Were
feel
you
like.
impulsive as a child?
I wouldn't say so. No.
Oh, maybe not. Yeah, you have to pretty much have to exhibit the symptoms before 12 years old in ADHD diagnosis. But usually, you did say that you had trouble like maybe learning the same way that your friends did, and usually, it's not an
My
intelligence thing.
friends,
It's
my
a
friends like sometimes like there would be exams and like I'm like studying every single night at the library, but one of my friends just does like an all nighter and then he scores like an 85 or like a 90, and I'm like, how?
Well, I think, well, with ADHD at least, the way that they test for it is they measure your intelligence and then they measure your working memory. This is like your ability to memorize short term things, like something while something else is going on. So if somebody um, told you what their address was and then at the same time they started explaining what turns you need to make, so you're getting like essentially two inputs, your ability to hold that first input in your brain. So it's essentially just your ability to memorize something quickly. It's called working memory. And if your working memory is low, but your intelligence is high, that's an indicator of ADHD usually.
Huh. Interesting. I feel like I probably have that,
Yeah, so
man.
mine is
Now
terrible.
that I'm thinking about it right now, because like sometimes someone's just like, all right, the address to this place is this, and then they're just like, all right, so you gotta make a left hand turn, and then go there, and then I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, if your girlfriend or whoever, your partner or whatever, or people are just accuse you of not listening, usually it's an ADHD thing. But and people associate it with hyperactivity, but that's not what mine is. Mine's inattentive type, so I just focus
Mm,
on something else while they're talking, and I just block what they're saying out. And it doesn't mean
yeah,
you're dumb.
sometimes that
Usually,
happens
I'm
to me.
doing an episode about, you know, these people are very, very smart. It's just they're lacking in this one area. So if you can figure that out, if you can get diagnosed, then you can say, well, like, okay, this is how my brain works. I know this now. I can compensate for this in this way. And mine is, note taking, reminders, stuff like that.
Yeah, for me, I've been trying to get better at note taking, setting reminders on like physical paper instead of like my phone.
Yeah, definitely. It's good strategy.
Yeah, because like today, I was like working on something on my website, and I was like deeply like invested in like trying to find the solution. But then my girlfriend was talking to me, and then I was like, I gotta focus on this. I gotta focus on this like solution and right now. And then I'm like, wait, what did you say?
Yeah, same here. And then also, sometimes I struggle with I'm very productive, but maybe I'm focusing on the wrong things. Like I should be focusing on my efforts on something else.
Yeah, yeah, I get that sometimes too.
So even though I'm productive, it's like maybe it's the wrong productivity.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Where can our listeners find you?
So if you're into podcasting, I have a podcast called Build Your Podcast, and I interview the founders of podcasting companies or influencers. I just did a episode with Jack Resider from Darknet Diaries. He gets like 3 million downloads a month. He started it from scratch. The dude's a he's just incredibly smart, and he just went all into podcasting, learned how to do it, and built it up from the ground. Now he makes more money as a podcaster than he did as a cybersecurity expert for Fortune 500 companies. But yeah,
Oh wow.
so if you're into podcasting, that is supposed to be like an educational thing for podcasters. And then Prodigy, that's the show that I have coming out on the iHeart Network, whatever. But it's all about intelligence and expert performance. So yeah, it'll be launching December 3rd. So if you're interested in that, check it out.
That sounds very exciting. I will definitely tune into that. And I will definitely listen to that one episode that you just mentioned right now, because right now I am lost as a podcaster. I still don't understand the concept of how people find your podcast and how can I get through the millions and millions of podcasts that are flooding the Apple podcasting network and find my way to the top.
Yeah, sure. No, I put that episode at the front of the queue because it was just great. So I'm working on it now, but it'll be out in a couple days. I'll send it over.
Please do. Well, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and responding to my urgent call for needing a guest today. It was a pleasure having you on, man.
Great, thank you.